The 2025 NFL Draft is in the books, and the Colts have their new young players to look at. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada draft pick of the week later in the show. I think you guys all know who that draft pick of the week is going to be. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd of HorseshoeHuddle.com, and my partner, Jake Arthur, is our credentialed boots on the ground for the site. We just got done a very busy draft week. Obviously, guys, we appreciate you all tuning in. And this week is all about reacting to that draft class, breaking down how they're going to fit in with this Colts team, and just going over, what the remaining needs are for the team. So today we're going to just recap again the Colts draft. We're going to go day 1, day 2, day 3. Talk about our thoughts on each pick and each player a couple days removed from the big event. There are a little bit more emotions involved on the night of the draft. So now that we're able to step back, take a look at the bigger picture, and dive into some of these players, we're going to give our honest reactions to a lot of these players here. So let's kick it off with the bell of the ball here, Jake, and talk about the first round pick. I don't even want to say it's like the least sexy pick of the draft, just because it was so obvious that it doesn't feel as like fun, because we all knew like if he was going to get there to 14, the Colts were going to take Tyler Warren out of Penn State. He ended up falling right into their laps, and they got the perfect blend of talented player at the biggest position of need in the draft. So, I mean, there's not really too much to say. I mean, we'll fill a whole segment here, Jake, but there's really not too much to say on Tyler Warren. It's just such a perfect fit for this team.
And I would say it's a pleasant surprise, too, because, I mean, you, me, and Steven on the very last show before the draft last week, we all picked Colston Loveland because we didn't think Tyler Warren would get there. And then when the Bears at 10 picked a tight end, that made it even riskier. The Jets went ahead and did Armand Membo, the smart move, but it was pretty touch and go there. And you feel like something's being taken from you almost when we've been talking about Tyler Warren more than I've talked about anyone else on this planet for like the last few months. And then it felt there for a moment like, is this really going to happen? Are they going to get sniped 2 years in a row? But no, it was a foregone conclusion that if he was there, you have to make that pick. And I mean, we studied him about as much as possible leading into it, but I looked even more into it. I was able to find out more about him as a person, obviously, because we're given more information, after he becomes a member of the team he covers. So all in on this pick. I mean, I would have loved Colston Loveland as well, but Tyler Warren was always option number 1A. Just, a good blocker, reminds you of Jack Doyle when it comes to blocking on the move and things like that. A guy who can sit on the line, but you kind of don't want to waste your precious, snaps with him just chilling out on the line. But he could do any single thing that you want a tight end to do, but he's also got kind of some unicorn qualities, because look at what he did at Penn State. You just don't see tight ends doing that. You see, a running back may come along every 10 years or so that can do that, or a wide receiver can do some special things, but you never see a tight end doing what he did. So the Colts got a rare opportunity here. They don't have unicorns fall in their lap like this very often, and it finally happened. And I mean, thank God they didn't overthink it or outsmart themselves and go in another direction, because there were some talented players still on the board that would have fit the Colts pretty well. But I mean, they did the wise thing and targeted the guy who I imagine has been pretty much their first option all along.
Yeah, I can't imagine they had many players higher than Tyler Warren in this draft class. I think at the end of the day, he was probably a blue player for them, a player they graded extremely high, maybe higher than most of the other teams in the NFL. And from my understanding, talking to a few people, the Colts were certainly one of those teams that had a big gap between Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland in terms of having Warren as a tier higher than Loveland. So I'm sure they were not complaining whatsoever when they saw Loveland go off the board at 10, even though they liked Loveland. they viewed Tyler Warren as a much better fit for what they wanted to do going forward. And ultimately, they were lucky enough to have him fall into their lap at 14. We had a good question in the comments here, and it kind of segues into kind of our projection for Warren is how do you think Warren compares to like what Brock Bowers looked like last year with the Raiders, or how Brock Bowers maybe would have looked with the Colts? But it's kind of hard to compare the two because Bowers is such a unique player in terms of what he can do after the catch, what he can do before the catch, just the overall athleticism he has. But Warren, in a lot of ways, is kind of the poor man's version of Bowers, for lack of a better term. Like, I'm not trying to say he's a poor man's version of anything, but he does do a lot of things that Bowers does in the short passing game, in the receiving game. But he gives you more of a blocking element where Bowers has to be so like pass dependent, on like pass catch dependent. I don't think he's going to hit the numbers that we saw from Bowers last year in Vegas. I don't think Bowers would have hit those numbers with the Colts even. He was in a really great blend of like perfect opportunity, and then he maxed out that opportunity. But I think when you're looking at what Warren could do in his rookie season, I think you're going to get a lot of the underneath targets to him. I think you're going to have maybe a lower ADOT, like average depth of target, than most would want. But I think they're going to do a lot of things to get the ball in his hands, let the layups kind of funnel to him a little bit, and let him create after the catch. So I'm not going to sit here and project like he's going to have like 1,000-yard rookie season, because I just don't think that's feasible with the Colts quarterback room, the other targets they have, and just overall how they're going to use him. But I do think we're going to see a pretty good season from him, and just in terms of like, he's going to have a good amount of catches because they're going to force feed him in the short game. I think he's going to have a lot of schemed up touches from tap passes in the backfield to screen passes to mesh concepts where he's running away from defenders. So I think they're going to use a lot of good things with Warren this season. I can't go as high as what Bowers did last year because Bowers broke a bunch of records for rookie tight ends. But I do think we're going to see a really productive rookie season from him. I don't know what the ceiling ultimately is with Warren. I don't think I would go as high as like all pro, but I think he can be like a Pro Bowl caliber tight end in the NFL. And honestly, in a draft class where there's not many stars in this class, like a lot of starters and not stars, to get a guy who has Pro Bowl potential at his position at the 14th overall pick, I think that's a pretty good pick for the Colts. So overall, yeah, I think Warren can bring some of that Jack Doyle element back to the run blocking game. I think he can give them an enforcer mentality in the pass game and really pick up their run after catch. And I think ultimately he could be like a Pro Bowl tight end one day. I think that's well worth the 14th overall pick, and especially when the Colts had a massive need at the tight end position.
Yeah, I definitely think as far as projecting role goes, the two guys who are going to have the most schemed up touches in the passing game are definitely Downs and Tyler Warren. I think there's just a lot you can do with those guys. Like, I'm just picturing now the tricky things you can do with Josh Downs and Tyler Warren together. I mean, you know how involved mesh is with the offense. Like, I think Shane is trying to think of so many ways just to because he's got these guys are smart too. Like, so yeah. When it comes to option routes and stuff like that, I think it's going to create a lot of opportunities for the quarterbacks, but it would be nice to be able to trust the quarterbacks a little bit more right now to like, well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what kind of chemistry they form with these guys. I mean, obviously Anthony's already there, but no, it's I think they're going to be very involved, and I don't think that the Colts. I mean, Tyler did a lot of just college-y stuff, like the Wildcat stuff, the passing and running and all that. I don't think the Colts are going to totally abandon that. No. The other night when I think it was Thursday night when they drafted Tyler, one of the very first things that Chris Ballard mentioned was his abilities inside the 5-yard line. So I think they're going to keep doing some exotic stuff with him. I don't know how much he'll pass and all that. That's kind of a rarity. I mean, it even kind of was there at Penn State, but I don't think he's just going to be some classically used tight end.
Yeah, and another aspect to this too is the Colts did, especially towards like the later part of the season, they did start to use more of their tight ends in the backfield as like a fullback or in like full house sets in the backfield and just as like a sniffer tight end a little bit more off the line. And they had some great success. They had multiple big runs last season doing that with Drew Ogletree. They wanted to do a little bit more of that with Kylan Granson, but Granson's just a tough blocker when you have to have him block anybody but a defensive back. So I think when you have a guy like Warren where yes, he's a tight end, but he's kind of like a tight end that can do some fullback stuff. I think it does open up a little bit of the triple option game, the, RPR type game with him in the backfield, even just, toss plays where you want to have like a fullback lead blocker, you could put him in the backfield there. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be like a generic usage of him this next season. It's not just going to be inline tight end, get out there, run a couple routes and seal off the edge on our outside runs. It's going to be very unique in terms of playing some fullback, playing some running back at times, I'm sure will be in the cards, or some direct snaps will go to him. He'll be flexed out wide a good chunk with Walley Cox down the line to get 12 personnel out there. And there'll be times where both those tight ends are in there off the line of scrimmage. So I think we're going to see a lot of unique ways that he's used. And if how the Colts have used Josh Downs the last couple of years, any indication of unique ways they can use skilled players like that, I think we're going to see a really interesting set of packages for Tyler Warren this next season. So I'm excited to see how Shane Steichen deploys a player with his skill set. And I think the Colts were one of the teams that were most equipped for a player like Tyler Warren. So it almost made sense in a lot of ways for him to fall to 14. But coming up, guys, we talked about the obvious pick, which was Tyler Warren, but we're going to talk about two, I don't want to say head scratcher picks on day two, but definitely more controversial picks than what Tyler Warren was to start off the draft.
There is nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game, right, Pacers fans? Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Gametime, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually decrease as tip-off gets closer. Here's why I personally love using Gametime. I can save up to 60% when I'm buying last minute for sports, concert, comedy, theater, whatever. It's procrastination proof. I've used it several times over the last year and a half. I've gone to comedy shows. I've gone to live podcasts. I've gone to sporting events and concerts. I've used Gametime pretty much for everything it's worth, and I cannot recommend it enough. And plus, the all-in pricing means that there's no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is actually what you pay. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Alrighty, Locked On Colts every day as we are back recapping the Colts 2025 NFL Draft. We talked about Tyler Warren at the top of the show, the obvious pick, the guy that the Colts were always going to go with if he was on the board. But the guys they took on day two, maybe not the most mocked two players to the Colts, certainly not Justin Walley out of Minnesota. I don't think he was mocked to the Colts by anyone, but let's kick it off with the second round pick, defensive end JT Tuimoloau. I'm getting there, guys. I'm getting there. JT Tuimoloau, edge rusher out of Ohio State, had 12.5 sacks this past season, but not really known for his pass rushing ability. Like, he can finish sacks and he can finish plays when he has the quarterback near him, but he's not a pure pass rush winner. I think he only had like a 12% pass rush win rate this past year, and that was in his senior season, which was like 80th in this draft class among edge rushers. So he's not really this like Kemoko Turay type of high upside, quick winner in the pass rush game. But what you're really getting out of him is the run defense, is the ability to clean up sacks, and the traits, the long arms, the power, and the explosiveness are all there. So for me, Jake, I'm very much in like with this pick, not in love with this pick. I think the Colts could have swung for more of a home run pick here, but again, in a draft class that probably doesn't have many stars, I'm fine with grabbing a productive starter caliber player in round two. Maybe it's not the sexiest pick, but it's a nice and solid pick there in round two, and I think he's going to be a productive player for them.
Man, it's been a while since I did the new thing. I will say I did mock JT Tuimoloau to the Colts in the second round in my final mock, but I had them trading back to do it. I think I had them going to like 53. And when I looked again at the draft board and like where everyone went, I think they probably should have done that. If I'm not mistaken, Donovan Ezeraku did get picked like right ahead of them. So like that may have been their intended target there at 45. But yeah, there wasn't a ton there. And I think they probably could have slid back a little bit, gathered another extra pick or two. I mean, Demetrius Knight was there, Tate Ratledge was there, and Trey Amos was there. Those are three guys I thought, maybe could be pretty good fits there. But other than that, it felt like picking someone just to pick them. And again, I really like JT Tuimoloau, but you maybe could have had him a few spots back. So him as a player, though, I do think it's a good fit. I think he's probably got a little higher upside than what we've seen from Kwity Paye. Really powerful, big, maybe longer type of guy. College production is there, which Kwity really didn't have at Michigan. JT has been like 3 straight years first team All Big Ten, like 40 tackles for loss in the last 3 years, which I'm a big tackles for loss guy. I want to see those numbers up there. And then I think like over 20 sacks, like 21 and a half sacks. So pretty productive, pretty experienced, which I always want to see. On a stacked Ohio State defensive line where I think everyone got drafted on the defensive line, he was one of the first picks of them. I think Tyleik Williams was a little ahead of him. So I like him. Again, I don't know how much the pass rush upside is there, but that's what you've got Latu for. I do think he complements long-term what they've got. So who knows how much longer Ebukam, Kwity Paye, and Tyquan Lewis will be around. But I very much see the long-term vision of Latu being your pass rush, your weak side end. And then you've got JT as more of your strong side, edge defender, edge setter. But yeah, I see the vision. I probably would have done it a little further back, but I don't hate it. Like, it's fine.
Yeah, I think when it comes to taking players on draft day, it's so much easier to say, like, moving back. Like, I'm with you. Like, in my head, I'm like, oh, we could have moved back and grabbed him, but we just never know how the board's going to fall. These teams have better intel than us, so maybe they knew a team within the next couple of picks was going to grab him. And I will say this in the Colts' defense here, like, when you're looking at the edge rushers that were available then, I think Ashton Gillette was still on the board. I think Landon Jackson were still on the board. I think those guys have higher upside than JT, but if you're looking for a guy who can come in from day one and be a solid role player in his rookie season with a high floor, I think JT was the best pick there. So maybe they just didn't want to make that drop off from the high floor of JT and just grabbed him at 45. But before we get to our final segment, guys, we got to talk about Justin Walley, the cornerback pick out of Minnesota. And this is probably where Jake and I differ the most because I think Jake is a little bit lower on this pick than me, who is somehow becoming the big advocate for this. I mean, look, we're talking about a 3rd round pick here. So obviously Justin Walley's not some final product that's perfect by any means, but the film is pretty darn good. And for me, something that really stands out and something that I've really grown on when it comes to draft prospects over the years is the emphasis on players producing at a young age. When they're stepping in at 18, 19 years old, what are they looking like out there in college? And are you seeing the growth from 18, 19 to 21, 22 years old? And when I look at Justin Walley, this is a player who's been basically a starter or a high-end rotational player at Minnesota since he was, again, 18, 19 years old. He was out there in big-time matchups against Marvin Harrison Jr., Keon Coleman, multiple other Big Ten receivers. And he was holding his own in those matchups from a young age. And then we just saw this past season that when he was a senior, when he was named a captain, when he was the guy in that secondary, we saw a really strong season from him with multiple pass breakups, couple interceptions. The Maryland game alone, I think he had 3 pass breakups and a pick 6. The USC game, he had 4 pass breakups in that game. So I don't know. I'm pretty high on this pick in terms of just where I think most Colts fans are. Like, yeah, I can understand going offensive line. I probably would have preferred an offensive line. But when you look at this cornerback room, it's a relatively slow corner room with not a lot of ball production. Like Juju Brents and Jalen Jones have a combined 3 interceptions in 2 seasons. And, 4 seasons combined if you're putting both of them together. 3 interceptions across those 2 years that they've both been in here. Sam Womack, you don't really know how much longer he's going to be here. A guy like Walley gives him the speed and the playmaking upside, and it's probably a guy that Lou Anarumo wanted. So I think the Colts view this as their Cam Taylor-Britt, and I think he's going to play a good bit this season. So I've grown on this pick a lot. Maybe I'm just too optimistic, but this pick has grown on me a lot, and I think Walley has the highest upside of any non-Tyler Warren player in this draft for the Colts.
Yeah, I don't hate the player or the pick. I'll be honest. I do think I find it hard to believe that you couldn't have gotten him a little later. Just adding a corner to a group that's already kind of overcrowded. That makes me sound anti-best player available, but like cornerback and wide receiver were like the two positions where they could have just gone throughout the whole draft and not addressed it, and it would have been fine. Yeah. I get like he fits well and he offers some things that they don't have, but I also look at what was on the board and I'm like, man, you couldn't have waited to get this guy, or like maybe traded up in the 4th and tried to get him, or attempt to, because like you look at guys like Wyatt Milam, Emory Jones, and Jared Wilson, all guys who very much fit needs and they had good value right there as well. And you could have seen an easy path for them to start right away. Yeah. Even Jacob Parrish was another undersized corner with pretty comparable athletic measurements. His testing, I think, was better, better tackler. Jamari Caldwell, you really needed to do more behind Grover Stewart, and they didn't do it until the 6th round, but a guy like Jamari Caldwell was there. Jonas Sanker, who is you're a fan of his. You need that third safety, which they still don't have. It just felt like a luxury pick to me. And again, yeah. I think Walley's going to be a good player for them. I don't know. It just seemed probably too early for that, and I just don't see the super clear path for him to contribute right away, because they love Jalen Jones. They're not just going to cast him aside. I do think Juju Brents or Samuel Womack's probably going to hit the cutting room floor after this. But it just was too early for me compared to what else was on the board.
That's totally fair. Only 2 things I'll push real quick, and then we'll go to day 3, guys, is we know Chris Ballard's very high on Jalen Jones. We have no clue what Lou Anarumo thinks of Jalen Jones. And he might not be very high on him. So that's one little pushback. And the other one is, from my understanding, Walley probably would have been gone within the next 10 picks. Because I think it was the Buccaneers and the Jaguars were both very interested in him as well.
Chris did make it seem like he probably wouldn't have been there, because we asked, like, did you need to do this already? And they felt confident he probably wouldn't be there after that.
Yeah, but coming up, guys, we do have some day 3 players to talk about, and you guys know how much we love day 3 prospects. I've had shirts made over day 3 prospects in the past, so we're going to talk about some of these Colts day 3 picks coming up in just a second.
The Armada pick of the week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. This week, we're highlighting the top pick from the Colts draft, the one selection that truly stood out, the guy who showcased the strength and power to push the Colts forward as we look ahead to next season. Is there any other choice? This week's Armada and clear-cut top pick of the draft is Tyler Warren, an absolute no-brainer. For starters, Chad Henry literally calls Warren truck. End of commercial. Thank you. No, but like the Nissan Armada, Warren is a heavy-duty and rugged player conquering the road with capability and confidence. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what Tyler Warren came here to do. It's very clear that our top pick of the draft is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. All right, Zach, so let's discuss day 3 here. I really didn't have many big gripes on day 3. There was a couple players who they probably should have addressed that position earlier in the draft, but like the players that they chose to finally fill those needs, I really don't hate it. So getting the thing started with round 4, 127. Now they traded back 10 spots from this and gathered an extra 6th round pick in the process. They grabbed Jaylen Travis from Iowa State. Now this is very athletic, very enormous, mountainous person. Also very, very smart guy. He's We found out today he interned, in some sort of political office in Washington, D.C.
Whoa. It was in the Indy draft guide, buddy. I brought
Was
that
it?
up. Yeah, it was in the Indy draft guide in the background. He interned with Amy Klobuchar in for like some summer things. So yeah, check out your Indy draft guide for that one.
Well,
That was in there.
I overlooked that and found that out today, buddy. But no, that's a super smart guy. I mean, you want your offensive lineman to be smart, obviously. You don't always see guys that big move that well, which is super encouraging, because it's like if Zach Banner could have just moved any modicum of what Jaylen Travis could do, then we might be having a different story. But no, I do like this pick. I think it gives the Colts now the flexibility. If Travis pans out and they like what he looks like in the first year, it gives them the flexibility now to try Matt Gonzalez at right guard, because they didn't want to take him away from his swing tackle duties to do it. But now they drafted someone who could maybe fill that role. So this is better for the offensive line. They said, rounds 2 to 5 was kind of their sweet spot for offensive linemen. So they maybe could have done it sooner. Maybe could have gone for a guard first. But again, this move kind of allows them to solve that guard spot as well. So kind of killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah, Travis, he's a project right now. There are a lot of things he needs to clean up on film, but look, if you're betting on anyone on day 3, bet on the guy with the sky-high traits, the size, the smarts, the great background, and just a good person overall. I think that's such an easy investment to make on day 3. So yeah, round 4 pick, I enjoy that pick. I think it's a good pick there. Round 5, which was essentially the last guy on their board that they drafted, is DJ Giddens, the running back from Kansas State. In the Indy draft guide, we put a comp on him as Marlon Mack. And when I watched his film, I was like, yeah, this feels very much like Marlon Mack. I think there's a little bit more pass catching upside with DJ Giddens, but whenever you see that jump cut on film, I don't know if it's you, Jake, if you're like me, Jake, but whenever I see a running back who's not like Jonathan Taylor size, so a little bit smaller than Taylor, do a massive jump cut, I think of that Kansas City game from 2019 where Marlon Mack was doing the multiple jump cuts in the hole and broke it off for 40 yards. So I always
remember that vividly. Yeah.
Right. I just think of the jump cut as Marlon Mack. So I saw Giddens do it a couple times and I'm like, oh yeah, I totally see the comp now. But DJ Giddens, I think, is going to have a big role in year 1, just being that second running back. I think he's going to be he's going to basically be what the Colts think Tyler Goodson is, but a little bit more refined than what Goodson has been the last couple of years. Too. Yeah, so I think Giddens and Travis are going to serve big roles for the team going forward. And then they finish it off with Riley Leonard, Tim Smith, and Hunter Wohler. Any of those 3 names really stand out to you, Jake? I mean, obviously a quarterback was involved in that.
Right. So I'll start with Giddens here. I think the Colts are super high on him. So a 5th round pick, but I could see him being that RB2 that you mentioned. I know they like Khalil Herbert, who they just brought in, but I think there's kind of room at the table for all 3 of them, including Taylor. Riley Leonard, that felt, out of all the players in the draft who I felt confident they would want to go for, obviously Tyler Warren was the most obvious one, but Riley Leonard was kind of next. I had the Colts picking him in the 6th round as well. So there's just too much familiarity and background there. Shane Steichen likes him. Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard both trust Phillip Rivers very much, and Riley Leonard trains with Phillip Rivers, so he's getting better. I think he fills the need of what they lost with Sam Ehlinger. So while some people question, what this does for the quarterback room and how it doesn't affect the top of the depth chart, no, it doesn't. This isn't for 2025. Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, color me surprised if they're both here this time next year. So you could be looking at Riley Leonard as your QB2 next year, a guy who's mobile, a guy who can operate that quick RPO game. And I mean, he's smart and he's training with a guy like Phillip Rivers. So there's limited upside there. I'm not saying he could really be a starter. I don't see that for him, but could he do what you need a backup quarterback to do? Absolutely. And you have a year where you don't need him and you just kind of develop him to be that. So did I like other quarterbacks more? Yeah, absolutely I did. But for a 6th round pick, you're getting a guy who's probably going to be around for the duration of his contract. So that's a plus. And at this point, you're just getting guys. There's not a ton you're missing out on when you're drafting a guy with the 189th pick. So
yeah.
It wasn't my favorite quarterback left, but I understood exactly what they were going for.
Yeah, I mean, best case scenario, you get a cheap backup for the 4 years of his rookie contract, or I guess the 3 years after this one on his rookie contract. You get a rookie contract 6th-round pick as your main backup. Middling case scenario, you get what Sam Ehlinger was, a good vibes guy holding that clipboard, having some good preseason games.
Exactly.
And then the worst case scenario, he loses out to Jason Bean and whatever. That means we get to keep the Bean thing going this whole next season. So overall, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine there. I did want to round this out, though, with the other 2 picks with Tim Smith and Hunter Wohler. Wohler, I think, is going to be a really good special teams player. I think he's, the next JoJo Dome and the next Sterling Weatherford. Not to pigeonhole him into that, but I do think it's a similar vibe, and I think it's another shot at that archetype that Ballard clearly likes. And I'm curious to see if he could maybe crack the field a little bit in some dime sets or some unique personnel sets that Lou Anarumo wants to run. But I really want to highlight Tim Smith real quick because I'm such a fan of this pick just because the Colts have not had a good backup run defending defensive tackle in like 6 years since Grover Stewart was a backup defensive tackle. Maybe if you go back to like Al Woods, when Al Woods was still like a rotational player here like 5-6 years ago. And when I look at Tim Smith, there's no pass rush juice. There is no pass rush juice whatsoever. I was trying to be optimistic, and I was like, let me just find one clip of him winning a pass rush. I didn't find that one clip, so there's really no juice there in the pass rush game. But as a run defender, you see the powerful hands. You see him winning with leverage. You see him breaking down double teams, and he just looks like a guy who's going to have a good 7-8 year career as a rotational run defending defensive tackle in this league. And I think there's a lot of value in that in round 6. I think this is a guy that the Colts have kind of needed for such a long time because they swing so high on these super high athletic, like gap shooting guys that don't really know what they're doing, but they can get upfield. That's what they've been doing at defensive tackle. Curtis Brooks, Eric Johnson, Taven Bryan. Raekwon Davis was a little bit bigger, but he just, he had a rough year last year. But with Tim Smith, I think you are getting a guy who's just developed high floor, powerful base, wins with his leverage, and he knows how to defend the run. And I think that's what the Colts have needed for so long behind Grover Stewart. So it was almost like a breath of fresh air when I was watching this film. It's like, finally, like, I don't need this guy to be a 10 RAS type guy behind Grover Stewart. I just need a guy who's not getting driven off the ball every single time 2 offensive linemen touch him. And for Tim Smith, I see that. I see a guy who knows how to get his legs set, knows how to take on double teams, knows how to displace guys one-on-one, and knows how to get running backs to the ground. And you know what? I will take that. Maybe I would have taken Aeneas Peebles there and continued to go with the high RAS type dudes. But when I saw Tim Smith's film today, I was like, finally, we have a guy who can defend the run. So I'm not going to complain about that pick whatsoever. If anything, it's one of my favorite picks in the draft for the Colts.
Yeah, it's definitely not sexy, and it is definitely a lesson in knowing the fact that teams aren't always looking for stars or starters. Like on day 3, you're very much looking for guys to fit a specific role, and exactly what they're looking for in Tim Smith is a guy who is not going to be pushed around in the run game. Yeah. Like he's going to hold his spot, and you're not going to have some massive albatross that opens in the middle of the line when he's out there, which is great because teams smell blood in the water when Grover Stewart leaves the field, and they give up these huge chunk runs, and they get run all over, and then Stewart has to come back on the field and is gassed, and it's just you needed something like this. And again, it's not sexy, and I was lukewarm on it at first because there were other guys there, but I mean, again, it's a 6th-round pick, and it's a guy who I see a clear usage for him. So yeah. I think he makes the team, which is great to say because as long as he holds up his end of the bargain, you see just a very clear role for him.
Yeah, if last year's draft was filled with guys, I guess the last couple years drafts were filled with guys on day 3 where it's like swinging off on athleticism or guys that we don't know if are going to make the team. This year's day 3 was very much unsexy, unspectacular, but a lot of guys who can serve roles and make your team. Like as of right now, I think I'd project all of these day 3 guys to make the team. Maybe Wohler's a little, because again, he's competing with McGrone and Shegu Alubi, who are really good special teamers. But outside of him, I think all these other day 3 guys make the team, and I think they make the team better in year 1.
I will say that barring Daniel Scott staying healthy and living up to what they hoped for, I really see Hunter Wooler more in the Trevor Denbo mold.
Yeah.
Kylan Granson and Trevor Denbo were like the two guys that Brian Mason really trusted to be like the personal protector on the punt team. And like I immediately, when they drafted Wooler, I was like, okay, there you go. There's your new punt team protector. So I think he'll probably make it. I don't know how much he's going to contribute on defense. We'll see. But I think he's going to be a core 4 special teamer.
Yeah, so I think the Colts, I think they raised the floor of the roster with this draft. I don't know if they really raised too much of the ceiling overall, but I do think they filled a lot of gaps, raised the floor, and just overall made the bottom of this roster a lot better. So I think it's a fine draft for what it is. I'm not going to say it's a home run draft, but I think it's a perfectly fine draft, and I think it's going to help this team win some more games this year. But we do want to thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We'd love your guys' rings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.